This episode is proudly brought to you by G Recovery, the Central Coast's leading destination for health, wellness, and performance recovery. From saunas and ice baths to massage therapy and soft tissue treatments, they've got all the science-backed tools to help you feel and perform at your very best. To book your next session or learn more, head to grecovery.com.au. That's grecovery.com.au. Hey guys, I just wanted to jump on and say a quick word before we get into it. First off, a massive thank you for all the support you've been showing lately. It honestly means a lot to me and it keeps me motivated and inspired to bring out new episodes. And I really hope I can keep bringing you content that's both engaging and insightful. So thank you so much. As you probably saw in the title, today we're going to be diving into something really important, and that's domestic violence and coercive control. I'll be honest, I was a bit nervous before recording this one. It's not an easy topic to talk about. It's complex, layered, and sadly way more common than I think a lot of people realize. So just a quick heads up, we will be discussing themes of violence, abuse, and coercion. So if at any point you do find it hard to listen to, or if it does bring up something for you, we've added some support service links in the show notes below. So please don't hesitate to check those out. My guest today is Ashleigh Chapman. She's a specialist domestic and family violence counsellor, and she's got over 10 years of experience. She's worked as both a clinician and a team leader, and these days she runs her own private practice. Ashleigh brings a really grounded, thoughtful perspective and a rare mix of professional insight and humanity to a really complex conversation. So take a breath, settle in, and let's get into today's episode.
Okay.
All right, I'm good when you are.
Let's go.
Well, thanks for coming on. Just for context, I have like a little piece that I'm going to read to start the episode off to kind of give a bit of an intro as to what it's going to be like and what we're going to talk about. So we don't have to dive too much into that. But yeah, just to kind of start us off, it'd be good to get a bit of an intro as to who you are, where you've kind of worked, what your experience is, and yeah.
Well, I'm Ashleigh and I am a couples counsellor on the Central Coast. But for the last decade or so, I've been working in the field of domestic and family violence here on the coast. So I started off working with families and NGO programs, working in home with people to reduce violence in the home. Then I moved into some team leader roles and rolling out programs to reduce youth violence in the home as a early intervention kind of piece. And then I had my now 3-year-old and realized that NGO life is full on.
For those that don't know what NGO is.
Yeah, so non-government organization.
Yep.
And when we're kind of working in those spaces, those roles take a lot from you and a lot of dedication in terms of the hours. And so I stepped out of that world and entered private practice to try to find balance for my family.
Yeah.
And yeah, I've always kind of had a soft spot for vulnerable populations and vulnerable people, particularly in domestic and family violence.
And you've got another little one.
Yes, I just had another one. He's 3 months old.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's me.
Exciting. What drew you to start working in this field?
Yeah, so it was kind of when I stepped into the family work, and I have my own personal experience and history in domestic violence as well. And it wasn't until I stepped into that family role, working with families in the DV space, that it really hit me that like, oh, this is something I'm really good at. I'm really good at engaging families, and I actually really enjoyed working with men who perpetrate violence as well, working in their homes. And yeah, I just kind of kickstarted from there.
I think it's a common thing with psychology. I assume it would be the same with this stuff. Yeah, people generally have their own personal experience that kind of pushes them to go and get into it. And yeah, when I was doing research for this episode, a lot of the really good podcasts already out there come from people that have come from their own experience and moved through it. And just
Yeah.
want to share that information. So we're going to talk about some pretty complex topics. There's a lot of kind of vocabulary that I had to learn just to understand this topic. We're talking about victim survivors and perpetrators and things. I think it's important to give people listening context as to what that means and what it doesn't mean.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to separate, I don't want to say like clinical and subclinical because that's not the way to word it. But I think especially for younger populations, there is a difference between someone that might be like a controlling partner and someone that is abusive. I just want to put some context forward before we kind of pick it up.
Yeah.
Can you speak much to, the terms that we're going to be using and the context we're talking about?
Yeah. So when you mentioned like a perpetrator versus a victim survivor, when we're talking about perpetrator, I even like to differentiate that between adult and young person. I've worked with a lot of young people.
Yep.
And when I'm working with young people, I like to use terms like young people use violence because it's not necessarily they're perpetrating that violence, because the ability and how they're trying to gain control is coming from a safety point of view.
Okay. Yeah.
When we're talking about perpetrators, and the first thing that often comes to mind is men who perpetrate violence. When we're talking about perpetrators, we're looking at a pattern of behavior. So this isn't someone who had an adult tantrum one time in their life.
Yeah.
This is someone who's abusing power and their power over someone else. That is someone who is perpetrating violence and someone who is a perpetrator. There's no kind of set definition or cutoff of when it's bad behavior that turns into perpetrating violence. Again, it is all contextual.
I think to add on to that, it doesn't have to be physical. We'll get more into that, but just to distinguish it, they are the same thing in that regard.
Yeah, absolutely. And then if we come back to a victim survivor, this is someone who has experienced the other end and being power under and vulnerable. Someone who's experienced domestic and family violence within its entirety. And sections of that as such. And it's not necessarily someone who's, come out the other end as such. We're not looking for someone who's left that relationship and, is a single person and thriving in life and things like that. But this is someone who's experienced the brunt of a power over.
I know there's so many different like subcategories of it, if you will.
Yeah.
We're going to talk a lot about the family setting. What I found was there's family and domestic violence, intimate partner violence, sexual violence, child sexual abuse, stalking and surveillance, and modern slavery, which I had never heard of before.
Yeah.
Can we kind of put a little bit of a definition on those so that we know where we're sitting?
Yeah, that's really tricky because they all kind of intertwine. If we're talking sexual violence can come into intimate partner violence, which can then come into child abuse and neglect. If we kind of want to conceptualize that, I would just say it's anything to gain power over someone else. And it's eliciting fear and it's taking away from someone's human right to safety. If we kind of can capture all of those in one. But if we have some different examples there, intimate partner violence is predominantly known between two people within a relationship, and domestic and family violence can extend out to anybody living in that family as well, brother to sister, sister to brother, things like that. Uncles, cousins, or anything that conceptualizes the family. Predominantly what we are seeing is within that nuclear type family, mum, dad, and children kind of thing. But the intimate partner violence is solely between two people within a relationship, and that doesn't discriminate to what that relationship quite looks like. And we also have child abuse and neglect, which is by any caregiver. It doesn't have to be a parent. It can be by any caregiver or any adult that child experiences. And then we've also got things like within intimate partner violence, we have sexual violence, but then within child abuse and neglect, we have sexual violence. Within friendships, there is sexual violence. So it can be really hard to kind of they will all intertwine. But it's really about what the relationship between the two people that can differentiate between, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. When we talk about male perpetrators, I think most people think violence. There's obviously coercive control and other topics we'll talk about. And obviously it's important to say the stats, majority male perpetrators. I think that's well known to everyone. Is there a difference in those categories there, and how common is violence compared to non-violent abuse?
Yeah.
Big question, sorry.
That's okay. Can I throw a question back at you?
Go for it.
Why do you think it's important to distinguish that?
For me, it was important because when we were starting, the first thing that came to mind was domestic violence, and violence is physical. Is the first connection that I made.
Yeah.
And then I did not really understand a lot of the intricacies of coercive control. The more I looked into it, the more prevalence I saw of domestic violence cases where people might not be hit, but their entire life has been uprooted and almost destroyed, and there hasn't been that physical violence element. So that was a misconception of mine. But yeah, I thought that would be an important place to start. Not so much on the male-female point, it was more the physical and non-physical violence.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because we do often hear in the DV world, but women use violence as well, or women perpetrate DV in different ways.
Right, yeah.
Becoming emotionally dysregulated, name calling, things like that. And I think we're always curious as clinicians to go like, oh, okay, and why is that relevant? Yeah, because humans become dysregulated, right?
Yeah.
When we look at the context of DV, we do know it's a gendered issue. And if we looked at every person who ever became dysregulated, we'd say everyone was a DV perpetrator.
I think the stat was like 90, it was like mid-90s, which I don't think people can comprehend how one-dimensional that is.
Yeah. And we know that women are dying.
Yeah.
Men aren't dying. So yeah, that in itself is a whole conversation around the gendered issues around DV. But I think you're right, where people have this misconception that like, oh, DV is physical violence, and we have this perception of men being physically violent.
Yeah.
And then when we have these other definitions around emotional abuse, around financial abuse, around coercive control, people can attach that to be like, oh, well, now women can perpetrate violence as well. They might not be hitting men, but they're, becoming dysregulated or name calling or stonewalling and things like that with their partners. And what we're always looking for in DV is a pattern of behavior, a pattern of power over. And it's often when we dive further into these instances where men are going, yeah, but this person, this woman I know, she was violent, or my ex-partner, she was emotionally abusive to me. If we really dissect that pattern between that couple, she's trying to fight for power with. She's so power under that it's eliciting certain behaviors. And these things that we need to be really, really careful of, because men can attach to that and go, well, if I was triggering her abuse, then she's triggering my abuse. Therefore, I have permission to abuse because I was being triggered. So we always are really careful when we explain these things and take it to the context of that couple. But what we see as clinicians within that context is, women are becoming dysregulated because they're being abused, because they're power under. And all they're trying to do is gain some safety and some power with.
Yeah.
The difference in perpetrating domestic violence is the power over. The goal is to have power over someone, and that's when it's not safe.
Yeah, just to preface, didn't want to word that question in a way that supported that. It was more, how do we word it in a way that we can talk about that presumption almost? And I think even just the topic of domestic violence is quite often talked about as if it's subjective.
Yeah.
And it's not. It's not a political issue. It's not there's social elements to it, but it's not something that's debatable. I think we quite often look at statistics and go, oh yeah, but this, but this, but this. When it comes to violence and safety and people's lives, we cannot ignore that. And it is, again, I don't have the number in front of me, but it is mid-90s in that regard to male to female violence. So I think, just to preface, that was not the way, but that was meant to come
I
across.
think it's a good question to ask though. And like I think we were talking about before, it can be really hard to talk to these things because we've got to go and here's the context and here's all the fine print that
Yeah.
can kind of come with that question.
Yeah,
I think it's a really good question to ask because that's the assumption that people have.
it is. Yeah, and it's important to address from the get-go because I think for anyone listening that might have had that, if they don't address that at the start, they're not going to actually understand anything we talk about from there.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is a really important thing to talk about. Kind of said at the start, there's that element of power over another. What I found was there's that control element and the threat of punishment.
Yeah. So coercive control, I think, importantly, is subtle. It's quite subtle. It's not really considered these quite overt behaviors and something that people kind of recognize a lot of. But some really clear kind of examples of coercive control can even be like, let's say, and let's just preface in these examples, I'm talking about predominantly heterosexual couples as well, just to make that note. But, say she wants to go out to dinner with her friends, he's going to be making a bit of a fuss around that. And he might not be directly saying, no, you can't. You can't do that because he doesn't want to be perceived as controlling. In his worldview, he wants to be perceived as the hero. So he might start to say things like, might start to, oh gosh, what's the word I'm looking for? Villainize her friends as well. Why would you go see Sarah? She said this to you, blah, blah, blah. Why would you go see that person? Or it might even be around, if you do, it means you don't love me. So, we've heard of cases where she might go plan a movie night with her girlfriends. He comes along and goes, oh, but I had this secret date I'd planned for us.
Yeah.
And now you've ruined it. And now I'm not going to take you on another date because you've ruined that.
Yeah.
Because you're choosing your friends over me. So it feels really subtle, but the end result is this woman now feels she can't go hang out with her friends because she's going to make him upset. So now she will change her behavior to appease him. And now she feels safe. And that's that threat as well. It's not always this threat of go and I'll punch you.
It's having this intense emotional reaction around an event so that you associate it with that negative outcome and you eventually end up appeasing to it.
Exactly. And even to the point where it gets to the point where it's the huffs and puffs. So she might go, hey, I'm going to go see Sarah on the weekend. And straight away her nervous system responds as, this is threatening because I know that he's going to have a tantrum over this. It's going to make my life hell. I'm going to come home from Sarah and he'll be cranky about this, or he'll go to bed and not talk to me for a week and things like that. So it feels more subtle because in comparison to punching someone in the face or throwing something, it feels smaller, but it's really not. Because the end result is still someone who fears their safety and starts to behave in a way that maintains safety. There is a massive difference between respecting someone and having respect and kindness for your partner versus I'm appeasing my partner to stay safe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll come back to the point in a minute. But yeah, the distinction to make there is the threat doesn't have to be an addition of something. It can be a withdrawal of something.
Yeah.
So I'm going to, like the example you used before, like I'll withdraw any love or affection or attention or anything. I'm just going to stonewall you for a week now. And that can be a threat as much as the addition of something. Yeah.
And again, in context and within a pattern as well. So this isn't just because she's going to hang out with Sarah on the weekend. This is when she goes to work, she stays back at work, or when she is perceived to choose her children over him. It can be in the context of anything.
Yeah.
She's late home from getting the groceries. It can be in the context of anything, not just this one event per se.
And it's always done in a way that's what is that word?
Is it plausible deniability?
Plausible deniability, that's the one. I could not get that. But yeah, done with enough plausible deniability that you're questioning your own self rather than their actions.
Yeah, because again, no one wants to be the bad guy in their own story. So I'm going to position myself as this is caretaking for you. I know what's best for you. This is how I show love. It's because you're really important to me. It's my job to protect you. Even all of those undertones are quite patriarchal in themselves and misogynistic in themselves. And even that is positioning me as the person of power. It's my job to take care of you. It's my job to love you. My job to protect you because you're this vulnerable small person. And it's delivered in a way that's loving and kind. And you'll often hear women say, "Oh, but he was really caring. He was really caring if I went out and did this, and he really wanted me to stay at home. He just really loved to spend time with me." And
don't see the underlying intention of it.
yeah, there's a lot to kind of dissect there.
Yeah, I think it's an issue as well with the online space, not to name names here, but there is a narrative going around in terms of like masculinity and what that means in a relationship. And I think for people that do seek that control in a relationship, it serves as perfect validation to say, I just want to provide or I just want to do this. But I think the addition is at the cost of someone doing what I say or someone doing fulfilling the wish that I have. It's like, well, I'll provide this, but that means that you have to not do this. And that's coercive control in a sense. And I think, no one is talking about that, at least online, in terms of that whole how masculinity presents and femininity in a relationship sense. And I think it can get swept very quickly down that road. You said like you worked earlier on with a lot of men that perpetrate. What are some of the kind of justifications they're using in their minds when they're coming in?
Most of the time it's she triggered me.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So it's not
Most of
this ideology kind of thing.
Yeah, and it's either she triggered me into this outburst or using violence and more physical violence. And if it's that more subtle coercive control, it's this adoption of this legacy of it's my job to protect. It's my job as man of the house, and my perception of man in the house looks like this. And it's often that they have now adopted this legacy of what it means to be a man and how to show up. And that's what we often saw in young people as well, adopting the legacy of their fathers. And it becomes more and more subtle each generation. So it might be this justification of, well, my dad would hit my mom, but I've never hit my wife. But the result is the same.
Yeah, there's still a control element there. Yeah.
You have a compliant wife because she's terrified,
Yeah.
but you don't have someone who respects you.
Yeah.
And you don't respect them either.
Yeah.
So a lot of the time it is around either with the more physical outbursts, it was she triggered me, she deserved it. And a lot of the time with more of that coercive control, it's my right and my duty to adopt this stance in my family, man of the house kind of legacy.
Yeah.
And seeping into that, more like, toxic masculinity that's surfacing online as well.
Yeah, interesting. And on that point of modeling like their father, how often or not is it that it is a cycle that's continuing?
All about 100% of the time. So yeah, it's if we look at like social learning, right? But it is, and I think we mentioned this before when we were on a call a while back, but often what I see in the couples space is a lot of couples therapists when they're working with men who have used violence, who are using coercive control, albeit they're not trained in DV. So I think we need to preface that. But a lot of therapists are looking for this wounded little boy behind men who use violence and perpetrate. But a lot of the time there's not. They've adopted this grandiosity of being a man, adopted this legacy of grandiosity of I am a man, therefore I get to, or I must.
It's I'm more important.
I'm more important. Yeah. I have to take on this role to take on power. This is how I saw my dad take that on, and I have been told since a very young age that I am, maybe it's the older brother. You're the man of the house when I'm not around. And so he steps into that legacy and steps into that grandiosity of, oh, well, this is how I achieve that control, because you are there to serve me and I'm there to have power over you. And the only way I can do that is to be big and loud and scary or manipulative.
Yeah. Like I'm just thinking from a psychology point of view, how do you even navigate that as a therapist when there is that common, like you said before, people are looking for a little wounded boy, but it is that grandiose sense of self almost.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking from psychology points, the way that you're going to treat that is completely different. So how would you yeah, how do you navigate that?
Yeah, so first of all, and it's going to sound like Psych 101, right, is that rapport. Like, we have to get that rapport with that client. So sometimes it is a little bit of padding some ego because I need to be able to, like, when I tell you that this is not okay, I need that to land. Yeah. And
Yeah,
if I psycho ed you, if I throw stats at you,
yeah,
I've lost you.
yeah,
But I need to appeal to that human behind this wall.
yeah,
And if I can find that person and if I can grab onto that slither of humanity that I know is there and appeal to that, then I've got you. And then now when I say, hey, this isn't okay, when I say we're going to do something different, this person's more likely to go, okay, because they trust me.
yeah. It's
It's
that level of
still
trust. Yeah,
it's still trust and safety. It's still the bare bones of sight. But the wording has to be really careful. The reframing of behavior has to be really careful. But you really need to deliver the intervention in a way that matches the person sitting in front of you. There's no kind of evidence base on, here's the model to work with men who use violence. But what I would say is a lot of the men I've worked with anyway, and from my clinical experience is men appreciate a sharpshooter, someone who's going to tell them straight. But we have to do that carefully as well, because if I've just met you and I'm going to go, hey, let's do something different, they're going to be like, nah,
yeah.
you're gone.
It's that conflict
Yeah.
straight away. Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. And it's that power over again. They're like, you're coming in to try and get power over me. No, I'm going to maintain my power and probably perpetrate even harder now. So it is a really tricky thing to balance your relationship with someone in that sense, that it has to be in a way that when you put an intervention in place, this person's at least going to be receptive to it.
yeah,
And that's the important part. And I think, that's where we don't get that in our degrees.
yeah.
A lot of clinicians I'll butt heads against too, because, they want us to make change within 1 or 2 sessions. Or
Just doesn't work.
it just doesn't work. You need to establish safety, trust, and rapport. If I want this person to be vulnerable with me, I need that there. I need that safety net for them
Yeah,
to step into vulnerability of going, oh shit, something's got to change here. And
yeah.
I'm going to do it.
And there's probably a level of self-awareness as to why they're there. And so the wall is going to be even higher. If you're pushing on that first, second, third, even session, it's too soon. Like they're not comfortable. They're not, there isn't that trust element. And then when you say the kind of, you've got to pad the ego a little bit, I think that's such an important point as well, because even just remaining like passive isn't enough in that regard, because they've got to have that level of respect, which again, if you're a female therapist, is probably hard to get.
Yeah.
How do you navigate that without reinforcing certain behaviors?
Yeah, so with the way that I was trained, we utilize an intervention called reframing, which is where I am bringing up the behavior, the problematic behavior, the benign intent behind the behavior. So I can see this is why you're probably doing that. And then if I was to leave it there, I'm validating.
Yeah.
But the third step is and this is why it's not okay.
Yeah.
But the reason it's not okay is, like, and again, if I'm working with a couple where that is evident, I can't then say the reason that is not okay is because you're hurting her. Because 1, he doesn't care. 2, it validates him. He's like, oh, well, it's working. And it makes it dangerous.
Yeah.
I have to make his motivating operator his stuff. The reason it isn't okay is because you are going to lose her. Yeah. If this continues in this way, I know that you want people around you. I know you want people to perceive you in a certain way. My worry is it's not working out for you. People are not perceiving you that way. Let me show you another way that you can meet your goals.
Yeah.
That's safe.
And like, I'm just sitting there going, what about, the victim in that regard? How does that work? Because obviously, yeah, you've got your bird's eye view of it's going to take a little while to get rapport here. And then I'm thinking victims, they're like, we need help. This is getting like dangerous. How do you kind of deliver that reassurance that or how do you even navigate that? Because I'm sitting here going, and I can't, just to preface, I can't put myself in those shoes and I've been in it. But if I was sitting there in that position, I'd be going, this isn't what I was expecting. Like I was expecting someone to say this is wrong.
Yeah.
How do you navigate that?
Yeah. So you're still calling out bad behavior.
Yeah.
You still are, but you're not putting in the intervention yet.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when we're reframing, that third part of the reframe is, yeah, this isn't okay. You're not getting what you want. You do have to be really careful about how much, not that you're validating the victim survivor's perspective, but how much you are emphasizing their voice in that initial session. The more that I do that, the more at risk that person is. So, and this is where I get really worried about the couples counseling space when there is DV, because couples counselors traditionally aren't trained in DV unless they've come from a background a bit like mine. There's definitely other counselors on the coast that have, but for the most part, if you're kind of taking that uni into private practice, you're not going to get training or experience, and it's sitting in front of you, and you can inadvertently create danger for this woman.
A massive point to talk about. Especially, I think, just from that couples therapy point of view, like, you're probably going to end up there first if you are in a DV situation before you end up with someone trained in it, because it's just the way that there isn't a lot of DV trained clinicians out there.
Yeah.
That would get missed all the time then.
Yeah. And sometimes, you have, it's always a red flag for me when a male makes the appointment. Always.
Yeah, wow.
Always. I'm straight away. I mean, I can't take this lens off. I've been working in this field for so long. The lens just doesn't come off. It's not to say I see every couple and every man as a perpetrator, but it's just something that I've always got eyes on. But it's always a red flag when a man makes an appointment. I'm always like, okay, what's the difference?
And
here?
Is it playing out in the, she's having this reaction and I've got a problem with that, or how's it playing?
No, it's definitely like a we, we're having these issues. We've got lots of conflict, things like that. But my concern around that is it's the grooming of the therapist. So what a lot of therapists don't realize, and like we hear about this in our studies too, and when we get face to face with clients, how, they can pull the wool over our eyes. And I have had the wool pulled over my eyes, do not get me wrong. But it is a grooming tactic, and we know that perpetrators use a lot of grooming of the people around their victim. Because they need to be positioned as the good guy who tried everything.
That was the point I was going to come to next, is sometimes the people that you would sit there and go, oh, I could never see that, are the people that are doing it, because they look after their reputation in everyone else's eyes so much so that it is plausibly deniable to an extent there. I don't know if that's the right word in that use, but
even in separation.
Yeah.
When they get to family law court, oh, but I tried to get us to couples counseling. She didn't want to borrow it.
Yeah.
All this sort of stuff. It's like, well, yeah, because it wasn't safe. And it's just another tool into your tool belt to come against her in a family law. So these are just the things that we need to have eyes on. And it's not to say that when that person calls, I go, oh, no.
It's not the end all, Yeah,
it means that I seek extra supervision.
Yeah.
It means that I handle things in different ways. So lots of couples counselors will actually do like individual sessions or individual phone calls before they see a couple, and a lot of them will say, oh, it's so I can assess safety. And my argument back is, okay, well, if you're trained in assessing safety, how are you doing that?
Yeah, it's relying on the fact that someone's going to be forthcoming with information, and it's just probably never going to be the case.
No, we've got men tapping women's phones. We've got them standing there while she's making
on the phone call. Yeah,
she's not going to probably say. Very rarely do we get the, "Hey, I'm really worried," but they're not predominantly reaching out to private practice counsellors. They're going through community services, women's health centre, schools.
Yeah.
We know that women have touched base with 7 points of community before they actually get to a DV specialist. Would that be school, police, friends, social groups, parenting groups, coaches, things like that, to slowly go, oh, we're having these dramas, we're having these problems, before they will come to a specialised service. Because women, they don't want to admit that they're in a DV relationship because they love this man. They fell in love with this man. So they feel responsible. They feel embarrassed that, how did I end up here? No one ends up in a relationship with someone thinking this is where it's going to get to.
Yeah. I want to come back to that, the after effects of that in terms of self-trust in decision making and things. But just while we're there, how does it transition in terms of relationship trajectory? Like, is there certain flags you can look out for in the start? But then I know like it can be this facade for a certain amount of time, and then the behaviors start to come in when you've kind of gotten comfortable. How do you generally see those or hear those, because you wouldn't see them in clinic yet? How would they generally start?
You mean like in the relationship? Yeah, again, really very different. But what we often talk about is, I don't know if you've heard the term like love bombing.
Yep.
Yeah, so that really intense need for attachment can really start. So this person might come across as needy, always really wanting to spend time with you, which is really hard because when you're starting a relationship, you naturally want to do that, right? You kind of become a bit obsessed with that person.
Yeah.
And we're like, I want to spend all my time with you.
Yeah.
You're talking all the time. I think you're like in each other's DMs and texting all the time. But it can look really full on. But it can be perceived as like, oh, he's so interested in me. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, we don't want to generalize these things. So then people kind of go out thinking like, oh, everyone who's interested in me is going to perpetrate
Yeah.
violence.
If you're getting in a healthy relationship, they're going to be interested in you as well.
Yeah, exactly. Like I'm stage 10 clear, am I? I'm very interested in my feelings.
Yeah, we're not saying that that's the flag. It's a green flag, but it's also can be
A red flag. Where it becomes a red flag is if you're not able to be as receptive. Let's say you're studying and working, right? So you just don't have that much time.
Yeah.
And this person's always like, I want to spend, but you never want to spend time with me. And, I really want to spend time with you, but you're never available to me. And you're like, well, yeah, logistically, I can't be. Yeah, I'm trying my best, but I can't be. It's when it comes with consequence. Yeah. That's where it becomes problematic. So you'll often have a bit of a flag as such around, but you're not interested in me as much as I'm interested in you because you're not making time for me. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's at the start of a relationship, we shouldn't have expectations that someone's going to drop their life for us and make all these rapid changes. Yeah, we can make space for someone, but it doesn't have to be at such a rapid or intense rate.
Yeah.
Another flag people often kind of reflect on and look back on is the isolation from friendship groups. So it'll be someone who, if you're going out with drinks with all your friends and you're like, hey, come with my friends, and I'm, oh no, I don't want to do that. They just want this one-on-one time. They're not interested in your social group. They're interested in isolating you from that social group.
And it's friends, but it's support networks as a whole. Like it can be work, it can be
Yeah. So really starting to, like I said before, like villainize the people around you. So then you have to turn to this person. They're your only person, the only one who gets it. They're the only person I can talk to about this, or they're the only one there for me because my friends aren't there for me anymore. And it's just all this messaging coming from that person.
Just making more and more vulnerable the further it goes.
Yeah. So they're some of the flags that people kind of express when they're reflecting back and go, oh, I can see some of those signs. Can even come down to like sexual coercion as well. So women often report things like, I felt like I had to have sex with him to keep him interested.
That was the point I was going to ask, was podcast Why She Stayed. I don't know if you listened to it. It was the one that I listened to the most just to get questions and topics for this. And they were talking about coercive control and how there is like a sexual element to it sometimes.
Yeah.
I struggled to understand the way that is, because I think, again, I'm very new to this topic, so I'm choosing my words carefully.
Yeah.
But from coercive control, I can understand the point in terms of influencing the social supports and everything so that someone's vulnerable and then gain control that way. How do you see the use of sex play out in that way?
Yeah, so in terms of like sex should always be able and feel safe to say no.
Mm.
So a lot of the time women will report, I maintained having sex with him just to keep the peace.
Mhm.
Yeah. So it wasn't necessarily that I was scared he would hit me or he'd have a big, physical tantrum if I said no.
Yeah.
But it was just more of if I said no, the huffs and puffs, the stonewalling, the belittling, you never want to have sex with me anymore. It must be a you problem. You better get your hormones checked,
Yeah.
what's wrong with you? That
It's
you
more of
don't
like a
want sex with me?
compliant behavior than it is like a connection as it should be.
Yeah.
Like a joint connection that's both consensual.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we have to, there's such a broader context around sex and relationships because, again, if we're looking at heterosexual relationships, women have actually only had autonomy in sex since the 70s.
Yeah.
Like,
Which is not that long ago, really.
not that long ago, yeah. Before that, it was definitely like you just had sex because you were men's property. I mean, it still is a very massive theme and a massive undercurrent in a lot of relationships today, even safe, loving relationships. There's still this feeling of this is my job as a good wife.
Is in other countries. Like we're speaking specifically about Australia and like nuclear kind of couples in that regard. But yeah, that it's still prominent in many countries. And I guess like I'm just thinking on the spot here, but I guess that's where you would see the cycle kind of element come in because the 70s again not that long ago, and so you're seeing men in the 70s that are used to that and engaging in that, and then kids coming through in generations, and then we're starting to see more coercive control than it is that physical element as well. Is that a hypothesis as to why?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's hard to talk about like generationally
Yeah.
with sex as well. I think sex more so comes down to the social constructs that we have to choose from. And the social construct that we have to choose from, even still, is that a woman is a man's property. In an intimate relationship, she is his.
Yeah.
And therefore she must appease him. And one of the ways to appease him is through sex, is through her body. And so, like I said, even in safe, loving relationships, some women, I talk about this concept of consent a lot because some women are, because of their own beliefs around what it means to be a good partner, are having like sex with their partners just because, and they say,
They're
"Would be
predisposed
I said no, but I just feel like I can't because I'm a woman. Yeah.
predisposition already. Yeah, which is that cultural element, I guess.
Yeah. But when we talk about it in a DV concept, it's this I feel like I can't say no because of the ramifications. And they might not be him having this really outward burst, but the ramifications might be withdrawing.
Yeah, it's like consequence.
Yeah. It might be name calling. It might be that control around her contraception choices, things like that as well.
Yeah.
Sexual violence can also come into the concept of how they're having sex. Yeah. So there's just so much that goes into
In
it.
terms of like the kinds of sex that they're having.
Yeah.
And it's more, I would assume in that regard, it's more, what's the PG word?
Yeah.
I'm just going to use the word violent, to be honest, or just like more, it's not a loving act in terms of that regard. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, I'm just having my need met. Done.
Yeah. I'm pausing again because there was a really good question I had from that conversation. Sorry, I've bailed on the thing because I'm like, I kept trying to like word it as I was going. I was just really fucking it up.
You're doing really well. It's actually said, well, it's hard to frame questions.
Yeah, the point that I was going to kind of come to was you mentioned like early on at the start, most people are looking for that vulnerable child. And it really is that grandiose sense of self almost. When we're talking about flags for when relationships are starting, it's that needy, clingy kind of thing, which I think you could kind of connect to a vulnerable child who's just wanting attention. And how does that grandiose kind of come into it when you're looking at it in terms of like a psych lens at the start? You're seeing someone that's needy, that's clingy, that's, again, it's already steering to that controlling behavior. But grandiose is very separate to someone that's feeling vulnerable, even though that's not obviously what's going on. How does that connect?
So I guess my first part to that is we will always play the role that we need to have our needs met at the time. And if my needs right now are to bring someone in, I'm going to be that vulnerable part of me. Yeah. But once I have you, you're now mine. And now I step into grandiosity.
I think it's a common thing that I heard in the space was like people will have multiple relationships, and it is this pattern on both parties in terms of like the victim getting into relationships with perpetrators and obviously perpetrators seeking vulnerable people. Yeah, what are some factors that would position someone in a vulnerable state?
So again, so many different things. So we have the social constructs in which we get to choose from, that we are men's property, that we are less than, that we're not worthy if we don't have a man. It's all of these kinds of narratives that can lead us into that. The other part of it is the generational trauma. So I can speak for myself in that sense. I can speak for myself that, oh well, he never hit me. I saw physical violence growing up.
Yeah.
And just to preface, not my dad, but I saw physical violence growing up.
Yeah.
That was my perception.
So that's like the threshold of this is what's wrong. Makes you not look at the other part.
Yeah. And it wasn't until I'd left that relationship to go, oh, okay, here's all of those, red flag, that's not okay kind of thing. So, history of trauma, child abuse and neglect, sense of self-worth. The other part of it is, as women, we are positioned as emotional caretakers of society. So if we have that vulnerable person, that real needy, attached person, it's this person, like, I can help him, change him, I can look after him.
It's that caretaker's role.
It's that caretaker's role that we take on.
Yeah. Which should not be the role that you take in a relationship. Just just to say that so clearly.
Exactly.
If you're dating someone, you are not their caretaker.
No, and I often I work with a lot of parents around mental load stuff, and men are always saying, how come after kids we're not having sex anymore? I'm like, because no one wants to have sex with someone they have to caretake for. There's difference between caring for and caretaking.
Yes.
Yeah. But it is, so we are positioned to look after men in that sense, like emotionally caretake for them. So if we're kind of presented with a guy who is, really confused with his emotions, and it's like, oh, I can be the one to help him through that.
It's that rescuer role kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So, regardless of trauma history, the social constructs that we have to abide by as women and choose from can pull us into that too.
And it's not to say that like we're taking that evolutionary lens, but that's not to say that it's justified in any regards. We're talking specifically about the factors that will predispose someone to getting into it.
Yeah. And then you have all of your socio-cultural factors as well. So there is so much that goes into it, but I think it's important to know that like all of those things apply. It's not just someone who grew up with DV. We have many women who have never experienced any form of DV and finding themselves in DV relationships. On the other end, again, what can predispose someone to being a perpetrator are all those things that we spoke about as well. The social constructs that men have to live by of grandiosity and legacy, childhood trauma and social learning, genuinely not giving permission to express emotion safely. Like you mentioned before about youth being confused about anger. So there's lots that kind of go into that. And these are the things, and like I said, like you said, we don't find these things to justify bad behavior. And it's important for the perpetrator to understand that too. Yeah.
I want to come back to the socioeconomic misconceptions. But while we're here, when you're working with couples in that clinical setting, you've gotten to the stage where it's known now that there's violence in the relationship. What is the goal as a therapist? It's something that no one talks about in terms of in podcast stuff. Everyone's understanding it. No one's actually going, this is where we go.
Yeah. And that's my difficulty with it all is we can talk about it till it's black and blue, but we have to do something. At some point, someone's got to do something. And we can't rely on government because we know government's so far behind. When I'm faced with this in a clinical setting, it's out in the open that this relationship isn't safe. It's creating safety. We create safety by any means possible. I was really concerned when I stepped into private practice coming out of NGO world, and I consulted with some other couples therapists, and I said, how are you working with DV in private practice? And all of them said, we get her to leave. And we know that increases risk. And we know the trajectory of that. That person's going to continue to probably have more relationships where they're experiencing DV, and this person's going to continue to perpetrate.
Yeah.
You've just given them permission to perpetrate with someone else.
Yeah.
And increase.
And put yourself in risk in doing so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I create safety. And the way that we create safety looks different for all couples. For some people, it might be supporting that woman to find safe housing, safety for her children in more intense circumstances.
Yeah.
More often than not, in those intense circumstances, we are not doing couples therapy in private practice. We're working alongside child protection, police, things like that. But for the couples that present to me in private practice, it's more around that coercive control.
Yeah.
And what we're doing is creating behavior change with that perpetrator to say, this isn't okay. Let me show you a way that you can, instead of having compliant family members, you have family members that respect you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I want to come back to the point of the differentiation between the roles of a clinician in private practice compared to DCJ.
Yeah.
But in terms of working with a couple to create safety, is it almost trying to help the male understand how do I word this? Trying to understand that if they can seek actual vulnerable connection, it's going to be more fulfilling than it is coercive, manipulative.
Yeah,
Is that
100%.
yeah? Yeah.
For some men, it's purely like emotional regulation as well.
Yeah.
Managing your own distress, tolerating your own distress. So it can be like bare bones basic like that. There's definitely been couples where we've separated out, and I've worked with the man one-on-one because we just needed that. It was more interventions for him, and if I keep her there, she's going to continue caretaking, feeling responsible. He'll continue to make it her problem.
Yeah. It's not the fact that someone is appeasing or pleasing or whatever it is. It's that there is that responsibility factor being put on them that is going to continue that cycle as a whole.
Yeah. So it's reducing that. She triggered me into this anger outburst and go, okay, how do you manage your anger? Yeah. Regardless who triggers you.
Yeah.
How are you just managing your anger here?
Yeah.
And so sometimes it's bare bones basics of emotional regulation before we can even get to that deeper stuff. Because if I'm going to poke and prod and go deep, I need you to be able to tolerate the distress that comes with that. If I peel back layers where you now become vulnerable and you don't know how to manage that vulnerability, tolerate that vulnerability, I am creating more danger for this relationship.
Would it be the same thing in terms of trying to encourage a woman to leave, but they, like we said before, that can be more dangerous? Is it for the same reason that there's probably not going to be the distress tolerance management skills there, and the threat of leaving then is going to spark that more?
Yeah, absolutely. I've worked with couples. I had a couple that I worked with for over a year where we had bouts of, I would say, like violent episodes where the couple had ended up in like punching and things like that, throwing and things like that. The difference being is they were both pretty active. And I was really able to set up safety strategies for her. So things like when we noticed his escalation, what was she going to do with the children and herself as well? We don't want to make it her responsibility, but we also have to put some safety.
Draw some action.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We can't just say, not your responsibility. Let's hope that he just manages his anger, So we're doing safety planning at the same time. So we had those safety plans in place. We didn't initiate those safety plans with him in the room.
Yeah.
We didn't have that. Because if he knows about that and sees her initiating a safety plan when he's maybe 1 or 2 dysregulated, boom.
Yeah.
He's losing control. I'm going to gain it back.
Yeah.
So we're really carefully putting safety plans in place.
And how do you get to that stage in terms of in therapy? Like, they're probably coming in together at the start.
Yeah.
How do you ensure that you can get that session with them individually? How does it get to that point?
Just ask for it.
Yeah. In person?
Yeah.
With them both there?
Yeah. So I, as a couples therapist, have mostly all of our sessions together or phone calls together. So if I'm having a phone call with partner A, I'll follow up with partner B, and I will be really open the whole way through.
Yeah.
Sometimes I have to be strategic in how I'm separating couples to maintain that safety as well. And if I have like a safety issue, and I need to separate a couple, I will make that a face-to-face appointment. It will not be telehealth. If I have that issue, I will make it a face-to-face non-negotiable. Again, I'm just wording that in really clever ways.
Yeah.
And I'm making sure that both couples have that space. So I'll say, hey, it sounds like I've got a bit of a thing here. It'd be really good for me to have an individual session with both of you. So it's not just her. And then he's going, where's mine? And why did you have that with her?
Yeah, and what are you talking about?
What are you
And
talking about? All that sort of stuff.
do you have to formulate a plan with her? Obviously, she's going to be questioned about what they spoke about, what you guys spoke about individually.
Yep.
And if her story doesn't align with yours, then that's going to get caught and just risk.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would imagine you have to be so careful with that.
Yeah. So we're not like making up lies
Yeah.
or anything like that. Like we're talking to what we did. We're just leaving some bits out. I know that there'll be clinicians listening probably like, no, you need to separate and like she needs to leave and blah, blah, blah. That has to be her choice. That is not my job as a counsellor to tell her she needs to leave.
Yeah, you can never tell someone what to do.
No.
Yeah.
It has to be her choice. But what I can do is if I have rapport with both, I'm increasing safety because now they have a touch point and community to go to when things aren't safe. Now they have someone to talk to. Now they have some vulnerability there. There's safety for them in that connection.
Yeah.
If I tell her to leave, I lose rapport. She doesn't see anyone.
Yeah.
At least now, when I keep that touchstone with this couple, I can softly refer into other programs, case management, things like that can support her to leave if she decides to. She has a right to decide she wants to stay as well. We aren't here to tell her otherwise. She has to make that decision for herself in the exception of DCJ coming in. Yeah. There has to be that exception there.
Yeah, let's dive into that. How do we separate private practice from DCJ from state-funded programs, whatever it is?
Yeah. So private practice, often, I would say like 90% of the time, aren't coming to couples therapy because there's an acknowledgement of we're in a DV relationship. It's also not a third-party referral. So we're not getting referrals from DCJ saying, hey, I know this cool couples counsellor over there, give her a go. No, DCJ and government programs need the evidence-based programs for families and child safety and things like that. So they're often contracted to particular programs that have lots of safety net around them to work with DB, where they can provide a more holistic approach. That would be the ideal, is that we're providing a holistic approach surrounding this family and this couple. So the couples that I'm seeing, it's more so, we have lots of conflict. We just can't get our communication right. And there's this desire of, I want to be in a relationship with this person. I love this person. There's just certain elements that I really don't love. And it takes a lot of unpacking for me to be like, yeah, because that's not safe.
Yeah.
It's not that this are personality issues. This is not safe.
I can imagine as well, at least in that setting, you're sitting there going, you've got the experience and the insight to be like, I know where this is going. But yet you've got to kind of let them find that on their own.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I've definitely had, because often when people are initiating couples therapy, she's phoning me.
Yeah.
Yeah, making the phone call like, how do I even get my partner through the door? And he doesn't want to bar counseling. Like this is just the generic couples counseling, right? But when we have that initial phone call and I'm asking a little bit more around their conflict patterns, there's been a couple of people where they've said that the woman has said on the phone call, yeah, he's physically violent with me when we get in a fight or conflict or when he's not happy or he abuses alcohol, things like that. I just refer straight to organisations like Relationship Australia, other organisations like Interrelate, where they have child protection sort of surrounding them as well, to be able to keep the family safe. So there's definitely times where we just have to say, that's not within my scope. And it's not because it's not clinically within my scope. It's I, as a private practice, don't have
the support there.
Yeah, I don't have the community of support around me to support safety.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there is levels
Yeah.
of DV I'm happy to work with. My blind spot is I have worked in the pointy end of DV for a very long time, so I have to be really careful around my what's the word for it? What's the word I'm looking for?
Bias?
Biases, but also like my level of like comfort.
Yes.
Yeah. So with what some couples therapists kind of go, whoa, that's so intense. I'm like, oh, that's not it. Like,
Yeah.
it's all good. I can work.
Do you almost find it harder to work with like the lesser pointy end couples?
Sometimes.
I would imagine you just get so like desensitized.
That's the word I was looking for.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I kept saying and I'm like, no, it's desensitized. Yeah, I could imagine 100%. And like we spoke on the phone before, but even just in like my experience with working in the NDIS, like I started with the pointy end,
Yeah.
and I just struggle to work with the lesser needs now.
Yeah.
It very much is what you start with and what your personal experience is. There's a lot that goes into it, but yeah, how do you navigate that now?
Supervision. Lots of supervision. He's like, no, don't do it. Lots of money spent on supervision. Supervision and just conversations with colleagues. Yeah. Safety is making things known. A couples therapist, we should never be holding these things on our own. I think a good couples therapist will have a supervisor who has DV experience, because you have to run these things by them. So that couple that I was seeing for a long time, I pretty much had supervision nearly every single time, because in NGO work, in state government work, we have teams built around us.
Yeah.
We have, and we should have, not a lot of organizations do it well, but we should have lots of opportunity for debriefing and supervision.
Yeah.
In private practice, you have to seek that on your own.
Yeah.
So you have to be really good at making sure that you have a great supervisor who's happy to work within DV, or comfortable to work within DV, I should say, because we should never see DV and go, oh, no, I'm closing my doors. Yeah.
They might never go back.
Yeah, you, like I think I said to you before, you will lose 90% of the couples on the coast.
Yeah.
Like, it's just so prominent and there's so much undercurrent of it. We can also be in an opportunity to stop it escalating. If couples are coming to us with verbal conflict, name calling, those lesser, and I say lesser, points of DV, we are in an opportunity to create safety before it gets
to that point.
Yeah.
I initially just go to say it almost always will certainly end up there at some point if that's where you're starting. Is that the case, or is it a degenerative kind of progression?
Yeah, we definitely see like a ladder.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially, in relationships that were perceived as being like loving and kind and safe and respectful. A lot of women kind of go, it wasn't really till we had our second baby that I kind of saw these things, or maybe they thought having a baby would fix those things, that he'd be more invested in the relationship and that sort of stuff. And then we have the, oh, but he's a good dad narrative coming to play.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely, because more stresses placed on that relationship means this person's going to reign in control a lot more. So yeah, we definitely do see more of a ladder kind of effect.
DCJ.
What
was your experience like working?
Yeah, so I didn't work in DCJ.
So yeah, it was the NGO.
Yeah. So the organisation I worked for, we were contracted to DCJ in a way that all of our referrals came directly from DCJ, and it was coercion in itself. It was essentially DCJ going, do this program or we're removing the children. So it felt like a last ditch effort to keep families together.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, again, you'd see pointy end because DCJ is so flooded. By the time families are getting to services and receiving support, things are pretty dire. Things are pretty intense.
Yeah.
But what we saw was a lot of consistency around generational trauma. Being the crux of what was happening for those families.
Don't have to go into it if you're not comfortable, but just for people that are listening that have not much experience or knowledge in this area, what does the pointy end actually look like? I make sure I'm always clicking the 18 plus so you can be as explicit as you want.
No, that's all right. Pointy end for me is sometimes we walk out of sessions and if you can be explicit, so fuck, I hope I see you next week. I hope this person doesn't become another statistic.
Yeah.
You leave some of those sessions going like, please be at your appointment next week.
Yeah, wow.
Please open the door to me next week. that's pointy end.
And I can imagine that would be so hard as well on initial when you're, again, like you said, there is a certain amount of time you have to spend padding and building rapport.
Yeah.
And if you can see that they're at that point, you're like, fuck, is it already too late? Like,
Yeah, like before I had my children, one of the families I worked with, I got to a session and he said to me if he'd been in and out of jail for violent crimes his whole life, like shot his dad, like just really intense dude. And I got there and he said, if she ever leaves me, I'll do whatever it takes to go back to jail, just so you know.
wow.
And I was like, this guy's going to know where I live. Like, it was really intense. It's probably one of the families I still think about to this day. And yeah, that was a DCJ family. And we had to advocate so hard to get this woman protected.
Yeah.
Because, you know, we want to believe in rehabilitation, but some people, the need for control is so intense that you will not. And he definitely was a perpetrator who groomed. You know, there was so much going, and I could just see straight through. I'm like, I know exactly what you want here. It's quite obvious to a clinician, but all of his caseworkers loved him. So I had to do a lot of advocating.
It's like that narcissistic kind of, almost like psychopathy in that grandiose, but you're very charming and very convincing and
very
yeah. And it's the system is just not bulletproof for that. Like they will get a certain way through the system on their own until they get to a point where, again, they work with someone like yourself that can see it for what it is. How did you manage? How did that story end up?
That story ended up, we end up being able to put her into witness protection.
Yeah. I go back to the pointy end. I think is a lot pointier than what people realize. Like, and again, we made that connection before that it is a ladder, and if you are in that point, like where you're noticing things, it's like you really do need to get that intervention, get that help as soon as you can, because the longer you leave it, the worse it will get.
And it like and that case was like a more physically violent case, so that was more of a stereotypical kind of DV case.
What about in the knot?
In the knot, we are looking at like system abuse, so men who are dragging women through family law court, and using their male privilege all through family law to just slander this woman and put roadblocks in place at all times. So I just have so many cases. There's probably more of those cases where we're fearful because it's like, this guy's so clever at covering his tracks and positioning himself as a hero in this narrative. I am terrified of your safety, of your child's safety, because of how clever they are at navigating this system and how much the system is actually supporting them.
Yeah.
I'm scared that if you step one way too wrong, you'll be the one in jail. Like that's kind of pointy end when you think about like really intense guys in like horror films. You're like, they exist.
Yeah.
They are here.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about that. Like if you're with someone that is that narcissistic or that kind of psychopathy traits paired with a high intelligence, that'd just be like recipe for disaster, and so hard to help. Like
so hard. So and you know, those kinds of presentations take really specialized intervention. You know, forensic psychology. Like that'd be where
it does. Where does that crossover come? Does it crossover in terms?
It does, but like that would be like a refer out kind of thing, and this is where we're missing the mark. Is the referrals normally go to a behavior change program, like men's behavior change. I don't know if you've heard about those, but they're awful programs. You get a bunch of grandiose men together, and you could imagine what they're talking about, how much they're validating each other in their abuse of power. So that's where it's kind of missing the mark. But what this really needs is some really intense individual forensic psychology when we have presentations like that. And that's probably not for like rehabilitation as such. I think sometimes we need to understand that there isn't going to be.
They just can't be. It's just trying to get you better off out of it.
Yeah, like we really need to be. We always want to give people the benefit of the doubt, but there will always be that minority where it's like this person's just not a safe person.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that would
And
be a forensic psychologist.
yeah, what's your experience in terms of demographics? I think there's some pretty solid misconceptions there. Like most people might think that it's lower socioeconomic groups that are where the statistics are lying. To my interpretation, it's pretty spread, quite evenly. But yeah, I think talking about it is important because it really is all aspects of society.
Yeah,
What are you seeing in the clinical space?
absolutely that.
Mm.
Yeah. In my private practice, I just see more white privilege because people have access to
Mhm.
finances
Yeah.
to support things like that. They have other privileges afforded to them. So I think socioeconomic kind of only comes into it in terms of access. And again, culture, access, and your perception. So again, we spoke a bit about before about my white privilege. So if I'm seeking support because I've been in a DV relationship, I'm probably going to have more access to the Indigenous woman next to me.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm probably going to be perceived in a different way
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah.
So there's all of those kind of roadblocks that can come into that. And even in when I was working alongside DCJ, a lot of people automatically think those, housing.
Mm.
All I'm working with is people in housing.
Yeah.
I was working with people that lived on the waterfronts,
Yeah.
in $1 million houses, and you're walking and going, where did this go wrong? Like they're looking like the Brady Bunch family from the outside. And when you really break down what's happening in that family, like that generational trauma is still coming through.
Mm.
And sometimes they're the more scary ones because they have finances and access to be able to hide.
Yeah.
Uh,
Would you see that more in private practice? Sorry, because it's again, I'm thinking like with the state funded programs, you're probably not going to get as many well off people going through those as you would going through private practice.
well, sometimes it depends if like child protection is involved.
Yeah.
Yeah. And often you don't get, more well-off families involved in child protection unless it's really intense because, again, there's this perception of, they've got access to mental health care plans, that they've got access to pay for a family therapist, that sort of stuff. So that can impact the triage in terms of who receives that support. So often if you're seeing a perceived well-off family, when you're working alongside DCJ, you are terrified because you're like, how bad is it? What's going on? And then the other side of it in private practice, yeah, I am seeing more privileged families and couples. And again, it is a bit scary because they have the means to hide what's going on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just throwing layers of hurdles in front of it.
Yeah.
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 We were going to talk about that kind of generational trauma and the cycle and stuff. And I mentioned before we started recording my experience in working with teens in a boxing gym and seeing some kind of teens come through from domestic violence families. And again, from the male's point of view, like I'm working with these guys and their ability to differentiate when's appropriate to use violence, because obviously boxing is a violent sport, but there is a healthy version in terms of like it's competitive and it's a sport.
And it's consensual.
And it's
And so like two parties actively engaged.
Sorry, had so missed that main one.
They know they're getting involved.
Yeah. Again, I come back to that point of consent because it's knowing when it's appropriate, and it's appropriate when it's consensual. But when we were just doing drills or something and there wasn't any contact involved, they'd be like putting contact in and they'd be really pushing for that. And it was just that awareness again when they're at that young age, and I'm sitting there going, gosh, they've got this from somewhere. If you're a teacher and you're working in the school environment, how can you look for it in teens or in children?
Yeah. Again, really contextual because you can have a withdrawn child or a really outward child. So sometimes those kids are pinned as like the naughty kid in the classroom. He's really, having lots of outbursts. A lot of teachers will report seeing that because school is safe. And it's often when we feel safe that we allow emotions to rise and we allow ourselves to unmask and things like that. So safe teachers and safe people will often see the more physical outbursts from children and young people. And yeah, that can be at things like, with a trainer, with a coach, stuff like that. Or you will see a more withdrawn child as well, because to access my anger feels so scary. So the only way I've seen anger expressed is dangerous.
Yeah.
So I'll suppress that. So it can go.
It's almost
either
picked up
way.
when it's inappropriate in the environment.
Yeah.
And being reserved and shut down will just get missed because you're not presenting anything that's like inappropriate.
But you've also, a lot of children inadvertently learn how to keep themselves safe through their behavior too. So they will be really compliant. You can have an overly compliant child, the good kid. Oh, they're so quiet, they're so good, because they've had to learn to be quiet and good, because I've learned when I'm non-compliant, it's dangerous.
Yeah.
So
And the inverse as well, sorry. Like
Yeah.
especially with the kids in boxing, like it would almost end up where they'd be arguing for control of what they did in the session.
Yeah.
And they're a kid that they can't run the session. Like it was so obvious that it was just this control.
Yeah.
And again, I'm just sitting there going, this has got to come from somewhere.
Exactly. And it's just, how have they learned to maintain safety and control in their environment? And that's what's going to play out, and that's what we're going to see.
Yeah.
So yeah, again, it's really dependent, because you could have that kid who's adopted that grandiose legacy, who comes into boxing class and is like, fuck everyone, I'm going to do what I want to do because this is what I see. Yeah. But then you've got the kid who's overly compliant because they're terrified if I step 1 foot out of line, I'll be disciplined.
Yeah.
So, that good kid could also be experiencing DV in the home. My biggest tip for adults is to be a safe adult. Yeah, it's not your job to investigate, but child protection is everyone's problem. And if we can be a safe adult, it means children have a safe place to land. We don't always have to be investigators.
Yeah. Well, that can just push it further away sometimes, hey?
Exactly, yeah. So, children will protect their family at all costs. So if you are kind of outwardly asking, they're probably going to protect their dad, protect their mum. Mum's probably saying, don't tell anyone. He'll hurt us more. Don't tell anyone. Dad loves me. He's just angry at work. Things like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's not always looking for those outward controlling behaviors. It's also looking for kids who are withdrawn, kids who are overly compliant. It can really be anything. Yeah. But if you're a safe adult for them to come to, that's all you can do.
Yeah.
And obviously reporting things when they've what's the word?
Come to you.
When they've
Disclosed.
There you go. I'm like, it's not a confession.
Yeah.
When there's a disclosure,
Yeah.
that you're acting on that disclosure, that you're, telling them that we don't keep secrets.
Yeah.
It's my job to keep you safe. And so I need to tell people who can also help to keep you safe. Because that's not okay.
Yeah. And kind of the flow and effect from that, how does early intervention in that regard work? Like, is there anything in place for if you're seeing a family where there is domestic violence and there is kids involved, is there support for them?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's lots of community programs that we have here on the coast. So places like Ozchild, in Interrelate, and Relationships Australia, all doing kind of relational work around DV, where it's taking a bit more of a whole family approach. So working with young people in the home as well as the adults in the home as well. So yeah, there's more community programs out there. There's wonderful social workers in private practice locally as well, who are very trauma informed, who have lots of training in domestic violence as well. So one of my lovely colleagues, she's a play therapist and can really support families in when children have experienced domestic violence as well, to do that therapy with the children, so they have new tools to regulate their emotions, new ways of attaching to people that aren't unsafe. In that though, like, we do talk about attachment, like how we attach to others, how we perceive others attaching to us as well. But yeah, if we, within DV, if within that family DV, if a young person who might not be directly experiencing domestic violence, i.e. it's not being perpetrated onto them, but around them with their family members, i.e. dad towards mum, then they perceive that as, that's not a healthy attachment, but that might be what they perceive as that, what you said before, that threshold.
Yeah.
So,
As to what's appropriate and what's not.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I also learn attachment through fear rather than through safe, loving relationships. My attachment to others is formed on the basis of fear.
And that's when you'll find people that are like seeking it out without realizing, although not seeking it, sorry, it's the wrong word, but like ending up in relationships that are more likely to end up there because they're basing it off of, that fear feeling is normal, and so that's what they're gravitating towards.
Yeah, and that attachment trauma means they're normally like that anxiously attached person or that disorganized attachment as well.
Yeah. Where are you looking to in the space now? Like, you're in private practice. What does the future hold for you?
So I'm taking this step back from NGO world just for a little bit while I kind of focus on my family. And in my private practice, so because, working in this space has always been a bit of a passion of mine, I have what we call like victim services stream. Have you ever heard of that before? Yeah, so victim services is a government incentive for New South Wales. Different state governments have different forms, but it's a victims of crime support and schemes. So essentially, if you have been a victim of crime, like domestic violence, whether that be in an intimate relationship or family violence growing up or child abuse and neglect, you can go online and apply for 22 free counselling sessions with a registered victim services provider. And that's how I kind of work with vulnerable people in my private practice, is through that victim services.
And it's for sexual assaults as well, isn't it?
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, cool. I didn't know one, yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I feel like it's it's not a clear-cut topic, and it's never going to be easy to talk about in a segmented, compartmentalized way. Like, it's so multiversed. But yeah, would love to continue this chat. I think it's something that's super important, and especially I don't think there is a lot of men actually seeking to, again, like you said, the men that are seeking therapy are sometimes the ones that are doing it. But I don't think there's a lot of positive influences out there to be able to go like, hey, we need to understand this. Like, we are the problem. And it can't just be one-sided in terms of women saying, hey, we need to fix this problem. Like, at some point it's got to come together. So it's a super important topic, super hard to talk about. But yeah, I appreciate it. It's been super insightful.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for being brave enough to talk about it.
Yeah, look, we worded some questions wrong, but that's okay.
We got there in the end.
All right, awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sweet.
Great.
Cool. That was a lot harder than I thought it was going to be. No. It went well. It was a lot harder to steer the conversation than I thought it would be.